What does energy mean to you? Light, entertainment, surfing the web? It's much more. Energy means education, better health, safety, economic growth. But 1.3 billion people don't have access to electricity. 1 in 5 living in the dark. Where people do have access to energy, finite resources are drained, producing and consuming energy in a way that destroys the environment and contributes to climate change, harming lives everywhere. These are two different challenges, but they have one solution: sustainable energy for all. Energy that is accessible, affordable, cleaner, and more efficient. What does energy mean to you?
Good day everyone, I am Godfrey Bartolome, a BS3 science student from Isabela State University, Cabagan campus, who will be discussing one of the problems facing nowadays, and I think you are facing it too. Remember that the world today faces an energy crisis. The world is dependent on certain natural resources like oil and natural gas that are quickly depleting. These resources are being imported from countries that have the ability to set higher prices due to the demand. Because of this, the world faces a great recession, and like Britain in the second half of the 16th century, we need to find alternative sources of energy. So for today, we will be discussing the energy problem in the Philippines and its solution. Remember that the energy crisis is a broad and complex topic because most people don't feel connected to its reality unless the price of gas at the pump goes up or these are the lines at the gas station. This energy crisis is something that is ongoing and getting worse despite many efforts. The reason for this is that there is not a broad understanding of the complex causes and solution for the energy crisis will allow for an effort to happen that will resolve it. Before anything else, let's take a look with the objective of this topic. After going through the topic, the learners are expected to, first, explain the various cause and effect of energy problem or crisis. Number 2, discuss the current situation of energy problem in the Philippines. And lastly, enumerate solutions in addressing the energy problem in the country. Let's first define what is energy problem or energy crisis. When we say energy crisis, it is the concern that the world's demands on the limited natural resources are the use to power industrial society are diminishing as the demand rises. The industrial society or natural resources are in limited supply. While they do occur naturally, it can take hundreds of thousands of years to replenish the stores. Well, in other words, when we say energy crisis or energy problem, it is an indicator for a great price rise in the supply of energy resources to an economy. Like many countries in Southeast Asia and other countries, the Philippines faces twin challenges of population growth and rising of energy demand. Dependent on imports for nearly half its primary energy supply, the country is highly exposed to oil price volatility. Now let's take a look what are the various causes of this energy problem. First is overconsumption. Overconsumption refers to the consumption model relies almost entirely on the use of non-renewable resources such as oil, gas, coal, and uranium. At the current rate of consumption, oil will be the first fossil fuel to run out. Well, in other words, when you say overconsumption, it is a situation where resource use has outpaced the sustainable capacity of the ecosystem. A prolonged pattern of overconsumption leads to environmental degradation and the eventual loss of resource bases. Another cause of this global energy problem is what we so-called overpopulation, which is interconnected with the overconsumption. When we say overpopulation, these data are to be put in perspective because they are based on current consumption. While it is clear that it will increase considerably, energy demands are and will be amplified by the demographic. Remember that as the population increases, the demand also increases. In short, it is directly proportional with each other. In other words, when we say overpopulation, it refers to a population which exceeds its sustainable size within a particular environment or habitat. Overpopulation results from an increase of birth rate, decrease of death rate, the immigration to a new ecological niche with fewer predators, or the sudden decline in available resources. Another cause of this global problem or global energy crisis is what we so-called the infrastructure or aging infrastructure. Another reason for energy shortage and scarcity is the poor infrastructure of power generating equipment. Aging infrastructure of power generating equipment is yet another reason for energy shortage. Most of the energy producing firms keep on using outdated equipment that restrict the production of energy. It is the responsibility of utilities to keep on upgrading the infrastructure and set a high standard performance. Another cause is what we so-called an energy waste, which we are individuals doing. Mainly coming from the unnecessary use of energy resources, energy waste describes the wastage of energy resources, in particular fuels and electricity. Remember that in most part of the world, people do not realize the importance of conserving energy. It is only limited to books, internet, newspapers, ads, lip service, and seminars. Unless we give it a serious thought, things are not going to change anytime soon. Now let's take a look what are the various effects of this global energy problem. First is the environmental effects. The massive use of traditional energy sources leads, among other things, to the increase of greenhouse gas emissions such as carbon dioxide. These gases create a blanket on Earth's surface, which prevents the release of the short rays of the sun by night. Thus, the energy crisis facilitates making the Earth a warmer place by promoting global warming. Another effect is what we so-called an economic and political effect, wherein the energy security is one of the major concerns of the energy economic centers of the planet. Energy conditions the possibility of growth, which is essential to the market economy and its development model. The fact that the energy crisis creates some socio-economic disturbances also tells us that this global energy crisis creates a lot of political disturbances across the globe. The quest for fossil fuels is one of the major causes of the same. Besides, with the failure of the energy markets, we see a crash in not only the global economy but only a crash of the energy available. All these are enough to give rise to the various socio-political disturbances. Another effect is what we so-called the increasing prices of the fuel resources. Because as the use of fossil fuels increases, the cost of these resources increases too. We must remember that the quantity in which the fossil fuels are available is limited. As we keep on using these resources, the amount of these fossil fuels further decreases. With every passing day, the demand for this fuel increases daily while the available quantity decreases every day. This leads to an immense increase in the price of fossil fuels, causing the price to increase day in and day out. It creates a huge economic disturbances across the globe. Another effect is what we so-called a political disturbances. The fact that the energy crisis creates some socio-economic disturbances also tells us that this global energy crisis creates a lot of political disturbances across the globe. The quest for fossil fuels is one of the major causes of the same. Another one is what we so-called the effect on the tourism industry. The tourism industry is largely dependent on the rise and fall of fuel prices. The tremendous rise of the fuel prices that comes as a result of energy crisis affects the tourism industry pretty adversely. With the increase in the fuel prices, there is an increase in the cost of tourism as well. In short, energy problem affects a lot, not just only in education, in political, in agriculture, in tourism, and so on and so forth, because it affects the whole society. Now, let's take a look with the energy problem we are facing as a Filipino, or the energy problem in the Philippines. Philippines is an emerging economy, and its economy has greatly shifted from agriculture to industry. In terms of energy use, conventional fossil fuels such as oil and gas are the main source for its primary energy demands. According to 2011 primary energy consumption of the Philippines, 31% of the consumption was met by oil, 20% by coal, 22% by geothermal, 12% by biomass, 6% by hydro, and 1% by other renewable energy like wind and solar biofuel. Now let's take a look with the 2019 power demand and supply highlights. With the first data given, the country's total peak demand in 2019 was recorded at 15,581 megawatts, which is 799 megawatts or 5.4% higher than 14,782 megawatts in 2018. As recorded by the system operator, the Luzon grid contributed 11,344 megawatts or 72.8% of the total demand, while Visayas and Mindanao contributed a share of 14.3% or 2,224 megawatts and 12.9% or 2,013 megawatts respectively. So as what we can observe there, the demand of energy really increases in most part of Luzon compared with the Visayas and Mindanao. Next is, the total electricity sales and consumption grew by 6% with an absolute level of 106,041 gigawatts per hour by the end of 2019 from 99,765 gigawatts per hour of the previous year. So as what we can see on the data, there's a big differences from 99,765 gigawatts per hour to 106,041 gigawatts per hour in just a small time. Because as the rate of inflation slowed down to an average of 2.5% in 2019 from a noticeably higher rate of 5.2% in 2018, the country as expected experienced a boost in electricity consumption. The sector with the largest consumption remains to be residential with 28.8%, followed by industrial with 26.6%, and lastly, the commercial with 24.0%. Another one is the Philippine economy has been expanding at a more than 5% annual clip. So it increases in just only in annual clip. The demand for power is expected to reach 30 million kilowatts in 2030, but current capacity is just 17 million kilowatts. Conglomerate San Miguel, which accounts for nearly 20% of the country's power output, is building plants with a total capacity of 900,000 kilowatts. Aboitiz Power is also building new facilities, but construction of these sites will not be completed before 2016. So as what we can observe in that data, as time passed by, our demands in kilowatts or our demands in energy really increases until it reached to 30 million kilowatts in 2030. Another one is that in the first half of this year, planned maintenance at major power plants will narrow supply further. On the island of Luzon, which includes the Manila metropolitan area, a natural gas-fired plant that provides about 40% of the supply on the island will go offline for maintenance, and other key plants will also have to undergo routine check. Another one is slowdown in economic activity and pandemic to weigh on the power and renewable sector. Power consumption in the Philippines to contract by 5.9% this year with further downside risk, according to a report from Fitch Solution. The pandemic is expected to still weigh heavily on the power renewables sector in the Philippines in the near time. Another one is that the continuous rise in global surface temperatures primarily contributed to the uptrend as the heat indicates heat dangerous level, especially in the months of April, May, and June. Moreover, the El Niño event throughout the year is a likely driver of the variation of consumption, especially in the households of commercial spaces. An increase in consumption can be attributed to substantial utilization of cooling equipment. Well, in short, the country has been suffering electricity outages or shortages, particularly during the summer months since the 1990s. Electricity demand was about 25.6 gigawatts per hour in 1991 and increased to about 53 gigawatts per hour in 2003 and 77.3 gigawatts in 2014. Primary energy supply is expected to double between 2011 and 2030. Energy scarcity has determinedly impacts on economic growth. Current challenges in the electricity sector in the Philippines include a supply-demand gap characterized by unmet demand. Now let's take a look with the solutions that we individuals can do in our homes in order for us to conserve and save energy and resources. Number one is do an energy audit on your home. Because one way to minimize the environmental footprint of our power consumption is to be conscious about how we use the electricity. Remember the word conscious about how we use electricity because it allows us to measure our home's energy consumption and identify areas where energy waste can occur, thereby helping you to save energy and reduce costs. Another solution that we can do is buy an energy-efficient appliances, because using energy-efficient products goes a long way towards your goal of saving energy and money, as well as saving the environment also. Take for example the use of light-emitting diode or LED bulbs instead of compact fluorescent lamp or CFL which contain harmful chemicals like lead and mercury. Another example is shift to clean and renewable energy sources. The Philippines has largely remained reliant on traditional energy sources for its electricity demand. A 2018 report from the Department of Energy reveals that coal continues to be the country's biggest fuel source, comprising a 52% of overall electricity generated. The best possible solution is to decrease the world's dependency on non-renewable resources. The primary concern here, with the continued use of fossil fuels, it will contaminate the atmosphere and destroy other natural resources. So we must shift to clean and renewable energy sources. Next solution is what we so-called easier grid access. Because people who use different options to generate power must be given permission to plug into the grid and getting credit for the power you feed into it. The hassles of getting credit for supplying surplus power back into the grid should be removed. Nowadays, people use various alternatives to produce power that must be permitted to plug into the grid and to credit for power feed into it. The hassles of getting into it will be eliminated. Also, to encourage more people to renewable energy, the support on solar panels should be given. Another one is what we so-called energy simulation. Energy simulation software can be used by big corporates and corporations to redesign the building unit and reduce running business energy cost. Engineers, architects, and designers could use the design to come with the most energy efficient buildings and reduce carbon footprint. Big companies must use the energy simulation software to redesign building unit for an energy efficient to decrease the energy cost and reduce carbon dioxide or other fossil fuels gases. And lastly, common stand on climate change, which both developed and developing countries should adopt a common stand on climate change. They should focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions through an effective cross-border mechanism. Furthermore, the construction of hydropower plants will be a big aid in the economic status of the communities in target areas. It will provide jobs and financial opportunities that would be a source of their daily income to feed their family or to enroll their children to schools. This will make a big difference in the socio-economic status of the community. Plus, the communities on the target area shall have better roads, which will improve the agricultural and economic activity therein. So, in a nutshell, it is a worldwide fact that the Philippines is blatantly rich in natural resources, which follows the fact that it owns an immense hydropower potential. This should be properly addressed in so much as 10% of the electricity requirements will be supplied by hydroelectric power plants. There are lots of untapped and ungauged hydropower resources in the country. This will be the solution in the future power outage, power generation through hydropower resources. Power generation through hydropower equips the country with numerous benefits environmentally and socio-economically. Almost 75% of the power generated in the Philippines comes from fossil fuels powered power plants, which is heavily polluting the environment on a daily basis. Moving to hydropower produces renewable energy that is sustainable, reliable, and cost-efficient. Moreover, harnessing renewable energy would avoid tons of carbon emissions. Remember that global energy crisis or global problem is not only the problem in our country, but it's a global problem around the world. So we as an individual must sustain our demands daily without compromising the demands of the future uses or the future generations. Therefore, we must practice the word sustainable development. If we can preserve our resources in our simplest way, we can do it by simply doing simple steps in our home. Remember that as we abuse our resources nowadays, it will be a big factor or a big effect in the near future. Not just only in the future, but on us also as being part of the generation. Nowadays, we must bear in our minds the importance of the resources around us because all of them has its limitation. So for now, we as an individual must know the limits and must conserve it for the future generation.